Hey, what is going on YouTube? I often get asked what funds or stocks that I own in my own individual portfolio. So I figured I'd make this video, talk through some of my thinking and rationale behind my own portfolio, and maybe share some insights with the research that I've done over the years, and hopefully help get you started if needed. So let's get into it. So before I go into the actual specific funds themselves, I wanted to set the foundation here. I fundamentally am not a believer in picking stocks as a way to build long-term wealth. It simply is like playing the lottery a lot of times. And honestly, with my own money, I'm much more confident in picking broad market ETFs that will appreciate over time. So that's fundamental number one, and probably the most important fundamental to running my portfolio. Now, for those of you that don't know, an ETF is an exchange traded fund. It's basically a basket of stocks that you can buy with one ticker. So instead of buying just Apple or just Microsoft or just Nvidia, you can buy it all plus a bunch of other names and have instant diversification. Now, the other key factor in terms of picking ETFs is the expense ratio. Now, this is a fee that gets taken out of the fund automatically over the course of a year. So you'll never see a line item or a bill for it, but it's taken out of your total return over time. So just keep that in mind if you're doing some research. Just that's a really small but significant variable that can kind of eat away at your returns as time goes on. So let's get into the first ETF in my portfolio, and that is VOOO, or VOO, or sometimes you'll see it on the internet referred to as VOO and Chill. This is the 500 largest US companies all within one fund. Now, what makes this ETF so attractive is that its expense ratio is 3 basis points or 0.03%. It's basically free, which is incredible for long-term wealth building. And that's why it's 45% of my total portfolio. It's the bread and butter of my long-term wealth building strategy. And what's amazing about it is it's so well diversified. You basically don't have to worry about really ever worrying about winners or losers, because you're kind of picking the entire or most of the entire US stock market to succeed over the course of our lifetime, which is huge. All right, jumping into ticker number 2 is QQQM, and this is a 100% tech mega growth ETF that really focuses on the larger tech names that are currently traded on the stock market. Now, a few key points with QQQM. This is the 100 largest non-financial companies that are traded specifically on the NASDAQ exchange. So not super important, but there are a lot of these massive tech giants, and while there is overlap with VOO, it's intentionally concentrated in the big mega cap tech names that over long periods of time will ultimately have higher returns and, benefit from the AI wave that is coming to the stock market, right? I'm a big believer in tech, and I just like the names that are in it personally. And I think there is some volatility that can kind of jump up with these big tech names and big tech sell-offs and all these crazy things. But over long time horizons, ultimately, I think tech will be a pretty big factor in the growth of the U.S. economy. So that's why I have it, but this is only around 20-ish% of my portfolio, so not as big as VOO. And that's really sort of the key theme here too, is it's a little bit more volatile, but not as big as the whole slice of the pie. Now, jumping into my third ETF, this is probably my favorite from a labeling lens, but it is SMH, or VanEck Semiconductors, or as I like to call it, shake my head, because I'm a child. Now, what this ETF does is it specifically holds the top semiconductor names. So NVIDIA, TSMC, ASML, Broadcom, AMD. Again, some overlap, but specifically this has a concentration in the picks and shovels of the AI trade that's going on right now and will likely continue for the next several years. Now, this is a more concentrated and often very volatile relative to VU or QQQM, but it's a small sector position that I personally believe in and over the course of my lifetime will see the fruits of the AI build out kind of take form, and Vanex Semiconductors benefits directly from that. But again, a key consideration here is this is only about 10% of my overall portfolio, so not as big as VU, and it's a pretty small percentage, and I like to keep it that way. Now, switching up things a bit here and shifting away a little bit from the AI world, SCHD is another ETF I own, and this one is kind of a boring, slow, stable one, and it really focuses on blue chip companies that have raised dividends over a decade or more. Now, while dividends aren't necessarily a 100% focus of my portfolio today, I do like to have a little bit of a smaller sized position here because it's, again, over the course of my lifetime, companies like these generally can not only generate some cash flow and some dividends, but also grow. So it's kind of a bit of a hybrid between some growth and some dividend income. Now, again, SCHD is only about 15%-ish of my entire portfolio, so still pretty small, but still meaningful. Now, the last ETF that I wanted to talk about is VB, or the Vanguard Small Cap Index. Now, this one I don't see gets talked about a lot, and there's a little bit of nuance to small cap funds and small cap ETFs, but this particular ETF has about 1,400-ish small U.S. companies all within one fund. Now, one thing to kind of note historically speaking is that small companies over really long periods of time have outperformed large companies by like 2 to 3%, so like just a little bit. And that kind of gap over decades and decades and decades can really compound. So it's a smaller position in my portfolio, around 10% or so. But again, it's sort of this trade-off of long-term growth for a little bit of near-term volatility. And small caps just in general are a little bit more volatile than bigger, more stable companies. So it's something that for now I'll keep, but as I get older, I'll likely actually roll that into VU or even something as simpler as VTI. Now, again, just holistically, my portfolio is really designed in a way that tries to keep things simple. I'm definitely someone that believes in the long-term growth of the U.S. economy, and names like VU will really be the ones that over the course of my lifetime will do a lot of the heavy lifting, and it's really kind of the bread and butter of the entire operation. Now, definitely one point of criticism for my own self here is there's definitely some overlap and concentration, specifically with names like NVIDIA, that is both held in SMH, QQQM, and VU. But the key is, in the way that I think about it, is it's more of a concentration into a specific theme or market focus rather than just owning NVIDIA 3 different ways. Now, that's sort of my core setup, if you will. do have some small individual single names, and maybe something we can go into in a future video and talk through some of my beliefs there, but ultimately they're a very, very small percentage of my portfolio. So curious to see what you guys are currently using for your own portfolio setups. What are some of your ideas or themes or interests that your own investments are kind of falling right now? And we'll love to hear any comments or questions that people may have, especially if you're just looking to get started. Catch you next time.